And now, CEO and founder of Managed Solution, Sean Farrell.
We want to welcome you to our, Microsoft series around Copilot, or as we're calling it, Ready, Set, Copilot. Kind of make some fun with it. We're getting a ton of questions in market around, what Microsoft's doing with the, OpenAI, ChatGPT, and of course, Copilot components within their business, and then how it affects our Office or Microsoft 365, Azure environment, all that good stuff. So we're going to talk about, in a lot of ways, how to put it to use today. And then as, people out there are looking at how to embed it into their business, AI, as it were, how do we do that? What are some of the questions we need to ask? Because all businesses are thinking about it just from a productivity standpoint. So with that, I'll introduce our co-presenters today, which are Richard Swaisgood and Jeff Lizzerbrum. Richard, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. I'm Richard Swaisgood. I've been with Managed Solution for 15 years now. And my background is just about anything related to Microsoft, including Copilot, which is what we're going to be talking about today.
Jeff?
Yeah, and ditto from my side. I'm Jeff Lizzerbrum. Similar background to Richard. I've been at Managed Solution for 12 years minus a few years, but put a little asterisk on there on how long I've been with Managed Solution. But I'm excited to share some of the new features of Copilot coming out.
Awesome. So we'll go through here. If you want to continue on, Jeff, we'll go through kind of a quick, who we are, and I'll just keep it very high level because this can be an eye chart as many PowerPoints are. But, we work with Microsoft directly. And what I mean by that is, we're beyond like the old traditional gold partners who deliver services. We're a specialized or solutions partner currently in 3 core areas with Microsoft. Azure being one of them. Another one is in their whole security realm. When you think about Microsoft Defender and all the stuff that exists in that Azure cloud and down, that's where we really excel. And then, of course, modern work, which is your traditional Microsoft 365 environment, SharePoint, Teams, you name it. But that's, in a lot of cases, where Copilot and some of this AI technology kind of comes into play, which we'll talk about today. So we'll stop there and go to the next one, but a lot of different awards. So we did our introductions. We're going to show, I think AI has been around for a long time. So we're going to show how it's, been used, and you guys are probably already using it in many cases, but we're just going to show you some examples today. And then the goal here is let's, in some ways start with the basics of Copilot. Like, how can you use it today? What are we, use cases, examples, and we'll show you some of those. And then we'll get into the, we call it the 6 C's, kind of how you build out your AI, journey, and ultimately how you can really leverage Copilot and other technologies outside of Microsoft to take full control of like the AI experience. And then Q&A throughout. So if there's questions, ask Jeff, ask Rich, ask myself, and we'll happily answer them. So this is something that was sort of homegrown by us, seeing what we saw in market. There was so many questions coming up from, IT leaders, business executives, line of business managers, IT managers. But to keep it simple, and I'll try to do that outside of this slide, really taking data and collecting that data ultimately and aggregating it into, centralized platforms, databases, really just getting that data to a place where we can sort of pull from it and create the ability to have AI experiences. That's where it starts. So that's collecting it, it's cleansing it. Sometimes it's conditioning the data through different, ways using Azure and other platforms. Then there's compliance components in there, which is very important, how we go about it. And then we get into the compute, allowing the AI or the chatbots or the different, platforms out there to be able to pull the data, and then, of course, connecting it all. And that's done through the Microsoft Graph, which we'll talk about all today. But we have a process we take customers through to get them down the road of how to use AI and then ultimately, how to leverage it in their business. So we'll turn this one over to Jeff here and let him go from here. Well, let me take this one. I'm going to go with this one, and we'll turn it over to Jeff.
All right.
So, this is the hardest part that we're seeing in market right now for anybody who's hearing about AI. We have AI committees that are out there in businesses. We have CEOs like myself who are saying, I want AI to, automate or eliminate or ultimately, help move something in the business forward. But the hardest part is figuring out what that is. So, traditionally, these are the questions we ask people to think about. What are your organizational goals? What are pain points in your business? I mean, if you're in a certain industry and you have a pain point in terms of getting information or, doing a certain type of job or function, you have to figure those things out first. And then capabilities in AI, you have to understand what those are. Where's your data sit today? How is it being pulled into one or many platforms so you can access it? I mean, do you have a good data strategy? I mean, all these things are very important as essentially data's grown in the market. So that's some of the basic questions we ask. And then, of course, do you have the people, the resources, and really the infrastructure, Azure, other cloud platforms, the necessary tools to be able to even use AI and ultimately take advantage of it. So you have to figure these things out first before you can, let AI kind of do its thing. And I will tell you, a lot of companies have AI running around all over the place with different line of business managers using it for marketing and sales. And the problem is we get out in what we call the wild, wild west, and we got to be careful with that. So use these questions. We have an ebook online that you can look at, kind of a quiz that'll lead you down the right path as to where to start. But ultimately, you've got to ask the right questions first to extract, what it is you're trying to achieve in the business. So now we'll go to Jeff.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, Sean. And when you're thinking about, all of these questions that you just saw, also think about, well, am I actually using AI right now? Because sometimes we don't really know what's behind the scenes because AI has been around for a long time. There's been breakthroughs in machine learning, as we all know. We see it today in practical applications, such as seeing like image recognition on a mobile device. We're seeing it more and more now than ever in automation, getting things, from point A to point B with as little human intervention as possible. That's some of our goals here. And when we're making predictions and insights, whether you're a financial analyst or a meteorologist, and looking at a ton of data from the past to help predict what's in the future, that's AI. It's in use today. We're also seeing it in many ways in our personal lives as we buy things, so as we're, looking at social media and advertisements, how that follows us every day. And AI is really kind of a big part of that as well. Now, one thing that I can see us really moving in great strides is healthcare. And there's been a lot of leaps and bounds in terms of helping patients and physicians and having that relationship. But even more importantly, just using AI to get patients to their doctors sooner, wouldn't that be a good thing? Getting the intake systems going. And that's a lot of areas that we help our healthcare customers to do. Everyone is kind of familiar with self-driving vehicles. I haven't gone there yet. I don't know if I'm there yet, but maybe one day. But everything that kind of makes up AI is natural language, machine learning, large language models. All of these things are actually kind of merged together, and that's what kind of makes AI happen. Now, some of the things we're going to be talking about are the ethical and social implications. So as Sean mentioned, and what Richard is actually going to go in depth of, is responsible AI. And how does Microsoft help us with that? We're going to dig into that further. But I always say, if you're not using AI in any means, you better start using it. You might be behind the curve. It's definitely something that's going to keep you competitive. Now, the good news about AI, what I love about it, is that, and this chart is actually pretty interesting in that this gives us how AI has adopted, how quickly it's adopted. 100 million users. Can you imagine? In about less than 3 months, ChatGPT, for example, adopted to ChatGPT, for example, adopted to 100 million users in less than 3 months, as compared to mobile device technology, 16 years. The internet took 7 years. Facebook took 4.5 years. So you can see how easy it is for the usage and the effectiveness. In fact, my parents elderly as they are, they're using it. They adopted to it quickly. They're writing beautiful Valentine's Day poems today, because today, actually a couple days ago, was Valentine's Day. It's a very easy technology to use. But organizations are actually thinking about this as well, that since it's adopting so quickly, look at this, 87% of organizations think that AI is going to give them that competitive edge. So why not? It's time to dive into it. At the same time, it's important to stay responsible. So we're going to, again, talk about how fairness, reliability and safety, privacy and security, inclusiveness, these are all of the core principles that make up responsible AI. And those underlying components, we have to be transparent about it, that we're using it. And if something goes wrong, there's got to be a way that we have to be held accountable for it. Microsoft is going to help us with that to get us to that responsibility level. Now, what I wanted to do was kind of dive into AI, and then really the exciting topic is Copilot, which has come out really in the last few months, kind of exploded everywhere, and how it applies to things such as automation and just business improvement overall. Now, before we get there, we're going to ask a poll question online here, and the question is going to be, what comes after ABC? So you're going to see a poll pop up here, and there's going to be some answers there. Go ahead and select what you think the best answer would be. And as you're going through that, we're going to move right along here. I'm going to show you kind of some ideas. First off, there are no wrong answers here. So anything that you selected really kind of goes. Now, some expected answers, you might have chosen DEF, 1, 2, 3, XYZ, whatever the case might be, because the thing is that your answers are really from your learned context, growing up, your languages, your education, your whole experiences. So what am I getting at when we're asking what comes after ABC? Well, this is an example of pre-trained generative AI. And when we talk about pre-trained generative AI, we talk about GPT. You're probably familiar with ChatGPT. Well, what is GPT? GP is the generative pre-trained portion of it, which helps us complete the answers. So it's an AI technology that scans huge amounts of data out there based on what it knows, based on what it has learned. It's going to give us the best completion of our prompts, of our inputs. Now, to go even further, sometimes GPT, you kind of feel like it comes alive. So the T in GPT is known as the transformer. This is what brings AI alive. It gives it more of a humanized context, as if it's a real person chatting back with you. Azure OpenAI and also Copilot, the prime definition of it, we can kind of define it in 4 different areas here. First off, AI, it uses automation to a large degree. It applies self-learning in many ways. It takes also, as we all know, it takes a huge amount of data to make predictions on it. And it provides also that semantic context. That's what that, using large language models, that's what that transformer is that makes it come alive. Now, I don't want to disappoint anyone, but AI, although it's been a buzzword for a long time, it's not revolutionary. We're in a revolutionary period for sure of computational statistics, but it really isn't revolutionary. If you think about it, what it's doing is it's scanning grid lines of huge amounts of numbers and data, and it's using actually the most modern forms of algorithms that are getting better and better every day. So GPT, again, coming back to it, is the generative pre-trained transformers. That's what brings AI alive. It helps us complete us and gives us that transformer part. Now, what's interesting is that, like, if you have a smart light bulb in your room, That light bulb is going to dim, it'll be brighter depending on when you're home, when you're not, on cloudy days, sunny days. It kind of learns of that behavior. But if you think about it, the transformer and the generative pre-trained part of it is going to give that light bulb an idea of how it could get better. So that's kind of a little analogy to how generative AI is defined. So moving into Copilot, what is Copilot? Well, Copilot is a form of generative pre-trained transformers, GPT, but it's bringing that to the Microsoft experience. Now, there's two main types. There's a free Copilot that you can actually use today, but there's also Copilot for Microsoft 365, which requires some licensing. You can check with us. We're a CSP provider that provides licensing for Copilot. So depending on the situation, come to us if you have any questions on that. But the main difference between the two, what is the difference? First off, you have to bring the data to Copilot free. So if you're using any of the free areas of Copilot, you really got to make some effort to get the data to it for it to do its magic. Where Copilot for Microsoft 365 is kind of opposite. It's bringing the assistant to you, and it already has the data available. So when we talk about the data, this is where we have to really, organize, maybe cleanse some of the data, prepare the data. That's going to be a big discussion coming up. But that's generally the main differences between the two. So if you wanted to get started on the free version, I'm going to give you some demonstrations here. And one way that you can go is you could just go to copilot.microsoft.com. That's a really good first step if you want to get your feet wet into what Copilot does. Now, one thing to keep in mind when you sign in with your organization identity, if you're using Microsoft 365 and you're using Entra ID or maybe synchronized identities from Active Directory into Microsoft 365, just letting you know that your data is protected. So anything that you're searching on, it's not going to be shared by any Microsoft entities outside of your organization. That's what that green badge means when it says protected. But if you're signing in with a personal address, like a Live, Hotmail, or other consumer-based account, that's a different story. All right, but just wanted to call out those differences in how you authenticate into Copilot. So moving into a demonstration of Copilot, I can show you that using Copilot for free is a great way to get started. And in this case, I'm launching Copilot, and everyone kind of is familiar. And again, I'm going to kind of, what I'll do is let me move this out of the way, and so you can see the whole screen there. Everyone's familiar with typing in, a prompt. Just like ChatGPT, Copilot is very similar. It's going to give you the prompts that you would expect. And the thing is that you have to really kind of give it thoughtful prompts in order for it to do its job. But also you can generate images. So if you wanted to generate a photo of, say, like people collaborating, it's going to go in and it's going to use not only ChatGPT for the text output, but it uses DALL-E 3 on the back end to generate images so that you can select images and put them in your presentations, your collateral, whatever you want. And the nice thing is that these are generated by Microsoft Designer right there. Another example that you can use is, let's say I need to write an email that is inviting people to my webinar, and my webinar is going to be on mergers and acquisitions. Here I'm going to my website. This is a public website, our managed solution website on mergers and acquisitions, and I don't really want to have to kind of rediscover or rewrite anything from scratch. I want to use the content from that web page. So I'm asking Copilot to really scan the website for the content, draft an email, and also include some images that might represent mergers and acquisitions, like corporations and buildings and things like that. So what it's doing here, it's scanning the web content. It's generating some images. Now, in this case, it's actually going to show me some images that I can get to kind of outside. So it'll find some stock photos and things like that. But there you go. It's generated an email invitation. It wrote it based on the content of the website. And what's cool about it, you can go in and if you wanted to download the image as a PDF or a Word, you can go ahead and do that and keep that as collateral, or you can use that to make modifications to your email invitation there. So the free product is actually quite useful in that sense. Again, we can go to the images that it found by going to the stock images there. Another useful approach is that, let's say I have private documentation inside my organization. So let's shift gears, and here I have a PDF of a document that's internal to me, but you know what? It's too long, didn't read, TLDR, and I just want to get the basic concepts of this PDF so I could just scan it. I just want to get the overall topics that it's presented in here. So I'm asking it to just give me a summary of the main topics, and there you go. It bolds out the main topics of the PDF, and it's right there, and I can kind of get a gist of what this article is about. So pretty useful from that perspective. So yet another way that you can use Copilot for free is, let's say I have a really complex article, and I want it to summarize it to me as if I'm a 12-year-old. You can ask it to do that. And so it's going to take some pretty, technical jargon that I see in this article, but it's going to help me understand it in more simple terms. So it's using natural language and large language models to be able to present this data to me in a context that is much easier for me to read, comprehend. I admit I do use this quite a bit, but it is useful. So keep in mind, it does quite a bit from that perspective. So that's an overview of what you can do with Copilot for free. I was going to move on to really kind of do anything else with Copilot. Well, I wanted to kind of take a little break here. And I'm going to also show you that things are not always perfect. All right. And here's why. Again, a couple days ago, Valentine's Day was among us. I wanted Copilot to generate me an image of a Valentine's heart, something like with Cupid in it, and here it goes. It's generating an image, and this is not what I expected. So ASCII art, I don't, so I'm going to ask it to do.
Is there even an arrow in that?
I don't even think so. So now I'm going to go ahead and I want it to ask it differently. I want it to give me a photo of a heart, and here it goes. It gives me an emoji. So I've had enough. I wanted to now, okay, I'm going to give me a realistic heart this time, okay? And now it's generating the image, and I think I've got it, right? Well, not exactly what I expected here, but you can see what I mean by what you put into it is what you're going to get out of it. So you need to make sure that you prompt it the correct way in order to get better results. So that's going to go with whether it's the paid version of Copilot or the free version. All right.
Yeah, I think prompt generation is going to be the Googling skills of the new generation. So how good you can kind of look for something is going to turn into how well can you prompt what you're kind of looking for. So I definitely think it's going to be a skill set that a lot of people are going to probably put on the resume. You're going to see people saying like, I'm good at generating prompts.
I think you're right there. Yeah.
And then when we think about the Copilot freemium or free version, you guys, I would say to everybody, like when you think about public information, public data stuff that's out there on the internet, whether it's, our website or, websites that you're searching, that's where you're going to be able to pull a lot of this information through those prompts to create, whatever it is you want to create. So the opposite of that is the private stuff in our business, which we'll talk about, and how that sort of coalesces with, what's out there in the real world and how we make that work. But there's just a lot at your fingertips using, the search engines like Bing and some of your personal live accounts from Microsoft, but a place where you can play around and still feel protected, that you're not impeding on your business and the things they're doing within.
Yeah, one of the other things I was going to mention, if you are using the business version, the one where it says like it's protected from the previous line, that information does get sent up to the Microsoft Search Analytics for your organization. So if you are trying to see if people are using that within your environment, you can actually go in through the Microsoft Search Analytics and then find out, what exactly people are kind of looking for. That could be important if you're starting to kind of roll out that tool set to get that sort of bird's eye view of how your organization is adopting to some of these technologies. So an added benefit of using sort of that free version is that then you even if you do direct users to sign in with their corporate account and the content's not shared with external third parties, you can still sort of keep an eye to see what your users are searching for, what are some common things, and see if there's any kind of additional training that you might potentially have to do.
Yeah, great points.
Go ahead, Jeff. Sorry.
Yeah.
Interrupted.
No, sure. I'm going to pause a second. And what I'll do is let's go ahead and actually go into one other area where you don't have to commit to the full Copilot licensing, but this is something that might be useful for your organization. Now, I call it freemium because, there could be some other Microsoft 365 license requirements in order to use this. But let's look at an example here of how we can integrate a Teams chatbot into Copilot. So in this case, this is an example of having what I named as my Copilot assistant, and I'm prompting it, I need help, and it comes back, how can I help you? Now, this is all within Teams. This is just through a Teams chat, and here I am, I'm typing in a prompt, and I'm just asking for like 10 good webinar titles that I could use, and it comes back with an answer, and I can say that, yes, that answered my question, and would you like to rate? Sure, I'll give you a rating. So let me give you a 4 out of 5. Sounds good. Now, this is kind of a useful thing. It doesn't require, again, the full Copilot licensing to use, but instead it's relying more on the back end of using Copilot Studio along with Power Virtual Agent, what was known once as Power Virtual Agent. It's now called Copilot Studio. But we're also using Power Automate in the background as well. Just to kind of break down and look under the hood of how this Copilot agent was put together, how this bot was put together. The first thing in Copilot Studio that we always want to look at to make it come alive is called topics. And the topics are what helps prompt it. So in this case, a trigger phrase, I need help. That's what's going to have it respond. And it's going to ask, how can I help you? And you can modify this if you want. But in this case, I'm using kind of the magic that goes under the scenes of Power Automate. And we're going to break this open to see from the flow of this, how we can actually go a little bit deeper into Power Automate flows to really kind of make this chatbot do what it needs to do. Now, in this case, I'm using, again, what was known as Power Virtual Agents. I'm doing some HTTP commands. Now, there is some code that you need to be aware about. You don't need to be an expert by no means, but it helps to know a little bit about where to copy and paste code to get the responses. More importantly, what I'm showing you here is that we can actually connect to data from other sources. So in this case, here's an example that we can connect to Oracle databases. Some of them have a premium to them. Some of them have a cost to get the added connectors. But this is another example of having to bring the data to Copilot, because in this case, Copilot is somewhat free, but you got to still do the effort to bring it there. Now, let's say I'm happy with the Copilot and I want to publish it. I can publish it into Teams, and what happens is it comes alive as a Teams app, and when I launch it, there I am. I can start using it and maybe publish it out to other users in our organization. Okay, so we covered kind of those two main types of Copilot, the free, freemium, and then also we're going to dive into really what Copilot for 365 is and where it really shines.
But
Now,
one of the
not to
things
get,
I
yeah,
did
go
want to
ahead.
just kind of cover just really quickly. The coding for the stuff, that's another area that you actually see Copilot being deployed. I think you saw on the banner in the sort of the demo. You can actually use Copilot to help you build out some of these Copilot scenarios. So you can use natural language to describe how your chatbot should work, and it'll kind of build it for you. So that's the other kind of component. There's no extra licensing or anything like that, but you'll see those experiences kind of bubble up to make even the process of building out all this stuff easier.
And would you guys, and this comes up a lot in questions, would you guys consider Copilot Studio sort of, if we were filming a movie, that's where all the production takes place, where you're actually building out the script? So is that a good analogy, the way to look at it?
Yes,
yeah.
Yeah. I definitely do.
Great analogy.
Great analogy, yeah.
So what is Copilot from kind of like all of the components that comprise it? So a user is going to leverage the Microsoft experience. So whether they're using, Teams or PowerPoint or Outlook, whatever application that they're using, they're going to see a Copilot button positioned somewhere in that application where they can actually prompt Copilot to do something. That prompt is actually going to go next out to Microsoft Graph, and we get a lot of questions on what is Microsoft Graph. Microsoft Graph is not something that you can directly see. It doesn't look like that hexagon shape really, by no means, but we can access it through things like PowerShell on the back end. But it's a collection of your content. It's your organizational emails, files, meetings, chat, everything that are all part of your organization, collaboration, and file sharing, email, and so forth. That's what really Graph is, but we can also expand Graph by adding additional connectors to give it more data, if it needs. The next thing, once it goes to Graph to kind of figure out where to get the response from, it's actually going to go out and modify the prompt to give it that more realism. So as we saw from our previous slides that, there's the transformer part, there's the large language models, and also, check this out, there's responsible AI, which is all part of this to help keep that prompt modified and also within the realms of a good responsibility mode. Once it comes back, it's going to return with a large language model response, and this is going to check back in with Microsoft Graph to make sure everything's matching. And finally, Copilot will come back and provide you the response. And hopefully it's a good response based on what your prompt was. And so that's really kind of the underlying realm of it. Now, all of these data flows, they are all secured. And even more importantly, everything is within the boundaries of your organization. So you're going to notice that that kind of dotted line there goes from your Microsoft 365 tenant out to Azure OpenAI boundaries, but these are all collectively your organization. Okay.
Jeff, I think we have a question that comes up quite a bit. Maybe you guys could just add a little bit more context to it, but you talked, this is a lot of Microsoft here, and people ask about, connectors and what that really means. And, what kind of sources outside of Microsoft can we get to? Can you guys expand on connectors a bit?
Yeah, sure can. Richard, did you want to take that?
Yeah, sure. There's all sorts of connectors available. So you can connect to Microsoft's Fabric if you're trying to expand to your existing business analytics. If you're using the Fabric, which I think is the new rebranded name for their Power kind of BI kind of stuff that they've been doing. You can do SQL databases. You can reach out to services like ServiceNow, Salesforce. So there is a lot of different connectors already built in. There's also a variety. There's a marketplace for connectors where third parties have created connectors to various, you might potentially see things like Box and some other custom ones that Microsoft hasn't developed, but you can leverage those. And then at the end, you can always go in and set up your own custom connector using, .NET code, that sort of thing. So just about any, if it's something that's web enabled, you can probably connect it using the Graph API.
Yep. And so, again, I think it's important because I think a lot of the time we know that we're going to be pulling and pushing information out of our own tenant and or Microsoft realm. But, companies, we talk about our 6 C's. It's all about connecting the data and the data sources you're looking to, put together so you can use these LLMs and ultimately AI to pull out the information you need. So very important. I don't think people understand the power of, Microsoft Copilot and the graph and really how it connects out through the Azure AI connector. So there's a lot to it, but ultimately at the end of the day, connecting your other business apps and databases then is very something very easy to do, once set up correctly.
Absolutely. Yeah. So why don't we shift gears and kind of take it back more to the end user? Now that we've kind of gone through the technical aspects, what does this really translate to the end user experience? So there's a few examples that we can come up with here. One is making meetings more productive. And now this has been out actually for quite some time where, let's say we're in a meeting just like we are right now. Richard, Sean, myself, Alicia, we're all discussing things. But in this case, what we can do after the meeting is done is we can actually see the speaker content when things were spoken, and we can use AI notes. AI has taken the notes for us. Isn't that kind of nice? It's summarized the main components and gives us a nice overview of what was discussed. Now, another aspect of it is when you're writing emails, when you're going through some email content. Now, everyone knows pretty much and are aware that you can have Copilot draft an email for you if you really want. I prefer to write the email myself and have Copilot as a coach. It's kind of like my coaching guide as I'm writing out an email here, and I think I know that I'm doing a good job. I'm trying to be friendly to my customer. I think I'm providing some valuable information here. But you know what? After I finish writing this email, let me find out what the Copilot coaching is going to give me as a result. So I'm done writing the email, and I'll do a little bit of coaching here. And it's analyzing it. And as you can see, what's going to come up is going to generate some suggestions here. I could be a little more enthusiastic. There's a little sentiment there where I should probably invite more feedback. And what I love about this is it actually gives me ways that I could rewrite some of the areas of the email. So quite effective. And I didn't realize, sometimes you write an email and the rule is like if you're kind of in the heat of the moment, you should probably wait a little bit before you send it. This is something that's actually going to help you kind of smooth things out, I think. In Excel, one thing in Excel that, I'm kind of not always the best at is understanding how to calculate things, and it takes me time to kind of go in and do that. And so I'm going to use Copilot to look at a table that I have in Excel, give me like a calculation that I'm requesting, and it's going to go out and pull the data for me. So that's really nice. But what's really cool is that it has further insights. Maybe these questions that it's asking, like, hey, did you ever consider asking this? I can go ahead and based on the context of what I prompted it before, it's giving me more information that I didn't really think about. And so using Copilot is really a good assistant at your side to really collaborate further on getting deeper and richer information that you never really thought of alone. So that is really kind of the end user experience. And, one of the things that is really valuable in this lesson is how much time people can save with Copilot. So this graph was really kind of based on some studies that were conceived as part of like understanding, hey, if an employee were, to cost $70,000 a year, they're spending 54 minutes per month, what is the ROI that Copilot can give us? And it was found that, just with 1 hour, you're getting 12% ROI. If you're saving 2.5 hours a month, you're getting 180% return on your investment. Now, when we pair it up with Copilot, it was actually going much beyond that. It was saving about 10 hours per month per employee. So that's actually a huge time savings tool that can be used here. And it could be, shown across the organization in terms of effective meetings, analyzing data, creating content, and processing email. And also processing email in a much nicer manner. We can also look at it across the functions of the organization. This is used pretty much universally. It could be used within HR, marketing, sales, IT, finance, you name it. And not only does it save time, but you know what it's doing? It's increasing that employee satisfaction. It's actually kind of fun to work within Copilot. It improves the quality of work, and also when it's done right, it's going to reduce that digital debt. And speaking of the digital debt, let's get right over to leveraging AI and using the power of our data. And what I'll do is I'll pass it over to Richard to really kind of go over some of the issues and risks, and so we could be much more ready.
And as we get there, before we get into the how we leverage our data, and Jeff, you did a tremendous job of describing some of the tools that we use commonly today, like Outlook and some of the Office tools. But what you have to think about, again, going back to the questions we ask CIOs and IT leaders and other people in the line of businesses, what are you trying to automate? And we have a lot of specific cases where we've seen, pretty good business use, through the lens of AI. So, people have landed on Teams in a lot of cases or other platforms for collaboration. So we know that's where they start. So maybe that's a good place to think from. What can I pull out of Teams to get better information? But a real example, we had more recently was, if you're a sales or a marketing team, but sales in specific, they take notes and capture information, whether it's through Teams and transcription, if you guys are familiar out there, or they take notes in products like OneNote or Word. If you can imagine, whether it's your sales leader, your IT personnel, or even myself who's curious to know how something went and or a better way to respond to the customer, think about ways to connect all this information. So say you took notes in OneNote or you had a notes coming from a Teams meeting you had, you could quickly respond with a presentation, look at some of the analytics. Maybe you were just trying to capture data from the meeting, how many of a certain type of product the customer had or how many different people they had working there, so you could understand better how to give them more intelligent answers. So all that through, say, a chatbot or just the AI notes like Jeff showed earlier, or any sort of mechanism that comes out of Office is a way to go about doing that. But again, you have to figure out how you want to connect, or what you're trying to achieve, I should say, in the business to be able to solve for that. And AI is really just the output. It's where it goes in and pulls that data that's relevant to you. So think about those questions you're asking your organization. That's the first step. And that's where you're going to gain those productivity increases that Jeff talked about previously. Anyway, with that, Rich, take us away.
Sure. So now that we've seen Jeff show Copilot, you'll probably have a couple questions, right? So there's some concerns about using AI. For example, there's a lack of transparency. Microsoft Copilot is Microsoft product, so you're pretty familiar with it, but you may not necessarily be familiar with OpenAI. They're a big player in the place, but there is a lot of third-party ones. So, the AI tools that your organization is using today, are they fully vetted? Are they, what are they doing with the data? Who they share it with? Are they using it to kind of train their future products? Is there any way for that kind of content and data to be leaked? Security is another one. Are they secure? So if you're putting in sensitive information, what are they going to do with it? Do they have the right controls? Is cybersecurity a priority for that software vendor or service provider? And then the other one, which is probably the number one for a lot of organizations, is, how is this going to affect my governance and compliance? If you're a healthcare provider, if you're following GDPR, if you're in California and doing the kind of privacy things, what is AI doing with the content, and is that going to negatively affect the way that I can, comply with whatever kind of governance and compliance? And so because of this, Microsoft has, in essence, gone through the process of developing their Microsoft Copilot solution product, which is, in essence, a solution, right? Unlike a lot of these kind of third-party tools that organizations use, I know here, for example, when a lot of this AI functionality started coming up, everyone was, asking us to turn on all these kind of third-party kind of services. Sales, for example, came up to us and they're like, "We want to turn on this bot," and I'm like, "Well, I don't know what that bot is. I'm not really sure where that's coming from." Using a Microsoft product is backed by Microsoft, right? So your business data is protected. Everything that you've done within the Microsoft 365 space, whether that is within the security and governance, that's being followed. So if you've gone through the process of setting up sensitive labels, setting up your security permissions, it's going to follow that. Microsoft does not have any access to your content or data. If you've set up customer lockbox or any of those kind of high-level kind of security solutions, their AI products will, in essence, follow that. None of the data that they collect on you is being used to train any of their data. It's purely from a quality assurance perspective, and even then, you can optionally kind of turn it off if you don't want, Microsoft to kind of give you that quality assurance kind of bit and pieces. And ultimately, your Microsoft 365 instance is isolated. So everything that you have from a Microsoft, whether that's Microsoft Copilot, whether that is Microsoft Copilot Studio, or any other Copilot tools and services, they're in an isolated environment so that you're not going to have any intermingling of your content with other providers. The other big component is that Microsoft has basically agreed to follow, they've committed to follow responsible AI. That is making sure that they have all the standards for fairness, safety, inclusiveness, transparency. It's backed by Microsoft's copyright commitment, which means that if you get into any legal issues from correctly using their ChatGPT products, they'll actually represent you in court, right? So they're putting their copyright commitment behind their product, saying like, hey, as long as you're using our safeguards in place, our responsible AI, and someone sues you because you generate an email that kind of sounds similar to someone, Microsoft is in essence kind of backing you. The other big component is that due to the fact that Microsoft has a close relationship with OpenAI, you're going to be using all of the latest AI models. The last one, and this is probably the most important one, being transparent and current. A lot of these AI models were trained in older data. I think what was it, ChatGPT 4, it was trained in 2021, I believe, was the data. And so using Microsoft 365 Copilot allows you to, have the magic of ChatGPT 4, but point it to modern data and specifically data that you provide. So that is your sales document, that is your human resources documents in a secure manner. It provides citations. There is sometimes an issue with generative AIs that they generate data. Like if you ask it a question, it tries its best to give you an answer, and sometimes it not necessarily be backed by an actual kind of document. Microsoft 365 Copilot, the responses actually provide citations, so you can go in and double check and say, hey, or do we have President's Day off this year? Well, here's the HR document where I pulled that information from, so you can always go in and sort of double check and make sure that it's kind of really up to date. And so Microsoft Copilot is in essence a solution for all these kind of different concerns for those reasons. If you want to go to the next slide. So now you've decided, okay, Microsoft 365, it's assuaging me from all those concerns that I have with general AI products. I want to go through the process of deploying Copilot. What can I do to make sure that we don't have any issues, right? As we mentioned, Copilot leverages your Microsoft Graph API. So that is all your messages, meetings, chats, file sharing, anything related within your Microsoft 365 space through their kind of wonderful semantic index technology. But if you haven't necessarily gone through the process of protecting your content and setting up those kind of data sharing rules, you might potentially have an issue with oversharing. For example, if you've maybe provisioned a SharePoint site that has sensitive information, but accidentally set it to public, or maybe you've shared it to everyone within your organization, intending only to share it to specific people, then it's possible for users to go in and get that information as an answer from the ChatGPT Copilot's kind of solutions. So because of that, we do recommend going through the process of authentication and authorization. So making sure your users are who they are and making sure you have all those security boundaries within your SharePoint sites and mailboxes and chat. Make sure that you go through the process of understanding where your data is. So what is sensitive within your information? Are human resource records sensitive? Probably. So where are they? Are they set up securely? Are they set up in such a way so users that are not supposed to get access to it don't? Oh, one thing I sort of failed to mention, Copilot, it looks at whether or not a user has view access. So as long as you prevent the user from having view access to the content, then Copilot will not present any of the information. So just to clarify, it's as simple as that. Just making sure that do they have view access to this document? If they don't, Copilot won't present that up. The other ones implement governance. So now that you know where your data is, what controls you're going to set up in place, what governance you're going to have over the data to make sure that you're not necessarily causing any of those oversharing scenarios. The last two, and this is just primarily to kind of get your Copilot experience the best that it can possibly be. Copilot is a very powerful tool, but you can also help it a little bit. If you have sales documents from 10 years ago, that's probably that's not useful anymore. So going through the process of cleaning that up will help Copilot kind of know what to do with it and make sure it's not providing any answers for something that it no longer needs. And then the last one is organizing and tagging your content. If you go through the process of making sure that all your sales numbers have a similar taxonomy, if you are applying those metadata tags in your SharePoint documents, it'll help Copilot tremendously because it'll then help organize things and provide you the appropriate information through the semantic index. As we're sort of ending this presentation, these are the questions that I think everyone should be asking themselves and their organization. What are your goals for AI? Obviously, this is everyone's at the top of mind. So what do you want to achieve? Have you had that conversation within your senior leadership, within your departments, to find out what things people are trying to do? Do you understand what are your pain points? Similar to what Sean was saying, what are some of the difficulties that could potentially be improved by using these AI tool sets? Are your users currently already using AI tools? Are they using Designer? Are they using any of those kind of third-party ones? Have you gone through and measured what content and what sensitive information do you have and deployed an appropriate strategy for that? And then lastly, have you trained up your users and have your infrastructure kind of support that? So I do recommend having those conversations. If you're unsure what your goals are or any of these kinds of things, you can always kind of reach out to us and we can kind of help you in that space. But I think this is something that every organization should be asking themselves. Oh, I forgot we had this slide. So now that you've actually gone through the process of purchase and you've prepared everything, how can we start adopting Copilot? So there's some recommendations here. So on the left is we have foundational guidance. So this is not necessarily Copilot specific. These are just any strategies in general that you should use when adopting any new technology. So, building the right team, making sure you have those Microsoft champions if you're using a Microsoft technology, making sure you're including people from across different departments. Building that right team is really important for adopting any new process and technology. Identifying key scenarios. So understanding what you're trying to achieve and making sure that that's something that is in fact achievable and tracking it. So once we want to reduce sales calls by 30% by using some word automation or some Teams recording or anything like that. Identifying those key scenarios and working through those metrics and making sure that you're actually hitting those goals. Peer learning. Most organizations don't necessarily have the time to provide individual learning for everyone. Everyone really learns from osmosis. Being, talking to the person next to you. I know through remote work that's a little difficult, but that is probably the best way to learn when deploying a new technology is to talk to the person next to you or people within your kind of department. Hitting those technical readiness targets. So if you haven't gone through the process of, securing your SharePoint or any of those kind of bits and pieces, creating a community of practice, gathering all that information that your end users have basically acquired through the adoption process and putting it in a centralized location so new employees, existing employees can leverage that is key. Analyze any feedback. There's a lot of wonderful feedback tools that you can use within the Microsoft platform that allows you to kind of see how people are feeling. You can use Microsoft Forms. You can use all these kind of bits and pieces, but collecting that feedback to understand how the adoption is going is key. And then finally, from those scenarios that you have identified, make sure that you measure success, right? So using something like Copilot, there's some really neat analytics that you can see to see how many emails get summarized, how many meetings get recorded. Using those measures as successes to validate that your users are in fact using those tools is critical. Now on the right, we have some Copilot specific tactics. These are enabling rapid hands-on learning. It is a pretty big paradigm shift in technology. The best way I can show people how to use something is by having them get their hands on it. Spin up that Copilot license, direct them to that Copilot's lab, to basically let them see what is possible. Copilot Lab is something that gets turned on once you assign a Copilot license, which just gives you all these example prompts that you can use within the various different Office apps. Those scenarios that we kind of talked about previously, target those ones that work best with AI. That'll give you the best results. And then once you start doing that early adopter, start scaling out rapidly and quickly. These AI tools really do work at scale as opposed to sort of 5-10 person engagements. Building on that community of practice, any of these really good prompts and natural language skills that you've been developing, put that into your community of practice so other users can use really great prompts that other departments have generated. And then lastly, iterate. What was it, the saying from Facebook, move fast and break things?
That's right.
Going through and embracing those rapid feedback cycles and understanding, hey, this isn't working. Well, let's retool and let's do this again, and sort of treat that as a learning process, right? Any feedback is good feedback, and doing that frequently is going to be really useful when you start doing these Copilot deployments.
And you know what? Now we're going to give you the opportunity to ask questions. If you want to scan this QR code up here, it's actually going to bring you to forms where you can ask questions that are going to be pertinent for what your goals are. So as you go through it, this is going to help kind of determine whether Copilot is a good solution for you, or maybe in general, Azure OpenAI would be a good solution. So take the time to go through those forms, and if you have any questions at all, or if you want to learn something more, or maybe, as Richard mentioned, getting the hands-on experience, just let us know. And I'll bring it over to Sean to wrap things up.
Yeah, thanks, Jeff. We appreciate it. We're pretty deep into this, and I think out of all of this, what we've seen in the many presentations and just interactions we've had with people is, we get a lot of the concern around, we talked about that data and that, sort of cleansing and making sure that data is compliant or really accessible to the right people at the right times. So there are tools and ways that you can quickly comb through your data and kind of see who has access to what, where, when, why, and how, all the stuff like Richard talked about, sales documents of old. Maybe those are things that are not going to be applicable in today's, AI experience for the user. So all those things can be accomplished pretty quick, but they're very important to your governance strategy around AI. But the second piece, again, you have to identify the scenario in the business. I mean, I would say less think about AI at times, maybe think about when you talk to people, what do we want to automate in the business? What do we want to make, how do we want to connect point A to point B so that potentially we can move the process along and take some of the emotional and let the rational decision making take place. Because if you say AI, I think it's overwhelming at times versus saying, where can we automate in the business? And then from there, we can figure out how the AI can help. So think about scenarios, call us if you have questions about them. But as usual, Q&A all the time here, and in future meetings, just let us know what you're thinking about and we'll help you out.